These video notes will be a review for Week 1, Chapter 1. First, let's take a look at our course website. Scroll down to Week 1 Programs. Under the sample program code, we are going to download and open Agent 2050. You can download the file by clicking on the download option. You can move this into the folder you use for class. Go ahead and open up code blocks. Open existing project. You should have your My Project set up. And under sources, the last thing I worked on was the lift discount. So that is the source file showing up here. I'm going to remove the file from the project. And then I will add Agent 2050. Now when I expand this, we should see the Agent 2050 code. Now for those of you who are using Visual Studio, lines 19 through 21 will keep the screen open after you run the program. Since we are using code blocks this semester, we don't really need lines 19 through 21. So I am going to remove them. There's two ways we can remove it. We can just delete them, or we can do a comment out style here. So if I put a /* and a // the C++ compiler will ignore those lines of code. So it's up to you. You can either comment them out or physically remove them. Let's look at the removal process. Just highlight them and delete. Now we know at the top of our file we should include comments. So let's just go ahead and add a quick comment up here. Week 1 sample program. And the name is Age in 2050.cpp. We're going to go through this program line by line to gain an understanding of how C++ works and what each line of code here does. We'll be looking at inputs, processing, and output. On line 3, we see the include IO stream. Notice this does not have a semicolon after it. Any line that starts with a # in C++ is going to be replaced before your code is actually compiled. So #include IO stream is what's called a preprocessor directive that will find the code associated with the file IO stream and map it into the top of this file before the program is compiled. Using namespace std sounds a little nasty, but what we're saying here is that the IO stream library file can be found in the standard namespace area. Line 6, int main, is where our program begins. Know that we can only have one file with a main, and so this is why we've been removing the main and replacing it with either lift discount or Agent 2050, because there can only be one file in our project that has a main function. This is where execution always starts in our C++ programs, and the word int in front of main stands for integer. So the result of running the code within our main function, that means all the lines within the curly braces, is going to have a result that gets sent back and is of type integer. So if we look at line 21, we see return 0 at the end of our main function. That is passing back integer value 0 when we're finished running the program. Our first line is a cout. You should be pretty familiar with this. The arrows are actually calling a function to output what's inside the quotes. Every line of code within our curly braces will end with a semicolon. So the first line of code provides instructions to the user. Then we see our input section, a declaration of type int for variable age indicates that we are going to store a value as type integer inside the computer's memory, and we are going to get that from the user who types in a number. So the cin arrow on the following line captures the input typed in by the user. Our process is to add age plus 30 to determine how old the individual will be in 2050. We're going to store that value in another variable. Again, we have to declare the type, and the type is int. It's a whole number or a counting number. And then our output section prints to the screen, you are whatever they typed in for their age, followed by in 2050 you will be the value stored in age in 2050 variable. The end line will end that line and move the cursor to the next empty line of the output. Let's run the program. On the build pull down, we could separately compile the current file. It's always good to go through all the steps. I'm going to leave space down here so we can see that there were 0 errors, 0 warnings, and that actually took 2 seconds to compile. But remember, it had to pull in the IO stream code and then compile with that. The building process is the linking process. That combines our code with the IO stream CPP file, and then we can run the program. So it really is a 3-step process. Even though we shortcut sometimes and just hit the build and run, the code has to be compiled into object code. The linker then connects all the pieces of code to build the executable, and the run button runs the exe file. The output is prompting us, enter your age, and I will tell you how old you will be in 2050. Now there's no way I'm typing in my real age here, so today I will be 26. Age in 2050 will be whatever the user types in plus 30. So for my age it will be 56, and the output section prints to the screen using cout, you are 26, in 2050 you will be 56. The end line will leave a blank line after that. Notice without adding an end line to the first cout statement, the second cout statement continues after the first line. So you are 26 is followed by in 2050 you will be 56, because we did not include an end line or a \n. So if you want to go to the next line in C++, you need to explicitly tell it to do so. Finally, we see the last thing that happens is the return 0, and the curly brace at the end closes our program. So that would be the end of the execution. All right, I want to close this and then show these files we were just talking about. So we're looking at the My Projects folder in my CSC121. We see that there are several versions of lift discount, liftdiscount.o, liftdiscount.exe, liftdiscount.cpp. We typed in the contents of liftdiscount.cpp. I'm going to open up the liftdiscount.cpp, and I will use another program, WordPad. So here's a copy of the program we wrote in code blocks. It's just a txt file. Now let's open up the liftdiscount.o file. This is the file that gets created by the compiler. This is not going to look very pretty, but we'll try to get a look at it. There's WordPad. Let's use that. So here is what the program looks like after it's been translated into a form that the computer understands. This is what our compiler translated our source code into. The comments are still pretty readable, and the strings are still pretty readable there because we're looking at the output. But the rest of this, the actual code, is pretty hard to make sense of. That's the object code that gets built by the compiler. I'm going to close that, and we're going to look at the exe code. This is the code that's actually run after the linker puts all the pieces together. And I'm sorry to say this is not going to be any more readable than the last file we just looked at. Machine readable code is not human readable code. This is the instruction set that the computer reads to actually run the program. Going back to code blocks. For each of the sample programs that are given to you each week, you should pull them into code blocks just like we did by replacing your main with the file, run them, and try things out. For instance, what if I changed age to be a string? We can always read digits in a string. However, we can't do arithmetic with digits. So let's see what happens when we try to compile this now. Well, I think we made the compiler mad. It's giving us a whole lot of grief here. And notice down the bottom it says build failed, 1 error. So the hardest part when you're first learning to program is trying to make sense of these error messages. Start at the very top. In red it says no match for operator plus. Operand types are string, and then it continues. But it does give us a hint because right on line 15 we see a red square indicating the error. So the problem here is you cannot add a string and an integer. 30 is an integer, age we changed to type string, and C++ has no idea how to add those two together. It makes no sense. So I'm going to put that back, recompile. C++ is happy again. We would be able to run the program. And I will run it one more time. The point of this exercise is that variables can hold any integer value. I could type in 42, and this now tells me that for age 42 that you will be 72 in the year 2050. Happy C++ coding!